All right, well, let's get a few more questions here, Jim. This next one will not be read on the show. Let me go to this other one over here.
Wait, can you read it to me and whisper it in my ear?
Well, hold on. It just happened to be the question that the cursor, the mouse was on, so I'll read this one. This was sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com from Hank in
Hank next door?
Statford, Ontario.
That gets on my driveway?
Statford, Ontario.
Well, you can on all the driveways in Ontario you want to. I don't care.
Hey, this isn't a bad email after all. Jim, have you ever had stage fright and froze while at or in the ring during a match or cutting a promo?
Oh, no. Well, that sounds kind of obnoxious. No, of course not.
You never had stage fright?
Well, I didn't say that, but I passed the. I was scared shitless on my first appearance on Memphis television, and you've seen it. I've tried to burn all the existing copies.
The one with you and Fargo?
Well, no, that one I don't consider that. I was just there to further along their issue. I was just a goof standing there giving him a plaque.
Yeah, for Wrestler of the Decade in 1981.
No, see, it was the previous decade. It was the previous decade. See, that's the thing is we just got caught up to counting all the votes. Took about a year. But no, I'm talking about my first time is when I wanted to become a manager, and I announced that fact with Lance. It was only on the Memphis show. It was just in the dark on the 90-minute Memphis show. They ran out of time, thank God, or it would have been on the tape that went around everywhere. But I got to get the first one out of the way. I was a stick standing there. I didn't know. When I got out there, I knew what I was supposed to say, but I didn't know how I was supposed to say it. And then I saw the camera and the studio audience, and everybody's looking at me, and they're, what the fuck's he out here for? And I had no good answer for him. And so Lance led me through it by the nose, but it was pretty bad, right? But by the next week, I realized, okay, I've done it now, and now I know what was wrong with it. And I need to perk some of these things up. And the next week was on the whole tape and blah, blah, blah. Yes, I've been nervous on a variety of things, especially if it was something that was, I don't want to say outside my comfort zone, but something I had not done before and was not particularly convinced that I was going to do it right. I had 3 days to think about that bump off the scaffold. And of the two worst things that could go wrong in my mind, number two did. Number one was I was going to get number two was I was going to get hurt, and that's what happened. Number one was I was going to fuck it up some kind of way and make the goddamn match bullshit, and at least that didn't happen. But I don't mean to sound egotistical, but on promos, I've never frozen up past that first day. When I didn't really freeze up, I said shit. It just wasn't very good. I can't remember another time on anything. I've been on MTV. I've been on the local news. I've been on TBS. I've been on pay-per-view. They may not have all been the greatest promos ever, but I've never frozen up.
Were there any wrestlers you could think of that did have a reputation for getting stage fright?
Well, not necessarily. We never phrased it as stage fright. It was just freezing up, not being able to cut a promo, not knowing what the, not knowing, but not being able to cut a promo or how to get out of something. I mean, you can go back and look at the history of wrestling television. There's been a bunch of those. And a lot of the guys that came to be known as people who just couldn't cut promos didn't get a lot of chances to cut promos, or they got a manager. The guys used to sell out the curtain at the TV studio if Bobby Eaton had to talk. And none of them wished him ill over it, and nobody was going to make fun of him. But it was always something funny because they knew he didn't want to do it. He knew that was the weak point in his game, and he wasn't comfortable with it. And when he was on, Dennis Condor was still making fun of this 5 years after the fact. When they worked for Goulas and Bobby was working the fucking angle with Savage, somewhere they'd injured his. No, it was the heel. The heel had an injury to his wrist or whatever. And so they made it part of the deal with using the cast, right? And Bobby was supposed to come out and say, well, last week, Savage or whoever it was beat me, used that cast. He had his wrist all taped up and everything. He said, as soon as he came out and I saw him, he had his arm taped up from the wrist to the ankle. Exactly. And Dennis would get on him. But anyway, no, as far as me, anything that I've ever had, and again, I don't say stage fright, because when I would go out, if it was a big building, when I was in the Superdome, I didn't have my glasses on. I couldn't see past the fourth row. I knew there were people there. I could hear them, but it was a big, dark place. Even in the buildings where it's lit up, and I was never nervous about talking in front of those people. Every once in a while, when it was something I had to do physically that I was afraid, oh, I'm going to look like an idiot or I'm going to make this look fake, that's when I would be nervous, potentially shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds. You could shove a lump of coal up my ass, come out with a 10-carat diamond, all the other similes. But I didn't show it to anybody. Oh, my God, I was fucking, to myself, scared shitless the day that we did the angle with Paul Lee in the original Midnight in the studio, where he was going to clock me with the phone. I was going to get the juice.
That was the first time you got juice?
Well, on purpose it was. There'd been some inadvertent incidents previously, but also the reason why I was nervous about it was because it's my angle that I've pitched to Dusty. I have asked him to let me do this, and it's going to be on television on TBS, and Paulie and the original Midnight are dependent on this, because this is going to kick off not only our angle with them, but their angle that's going to get them over. And if I drop this fucking blade, or if somebody sees me using it or whatever, and I expose or it looks bad on television. So I was very nervous about that. But in the end, the only mistake was I neglected to realize that I could have waited 5 seconds and would have bled from the first one. It was so cold in the studio. I've told the story. I went to the well a few more times without waiting, and then almost got us kicked off television because I bled so much. But
how nervous do you think Paul was?
That's the thing with Paul in those days, and when we were working in the six mans, or whenever he had to do something physical, Paul was the same way as I was. He was pretty confident he could go out and cut a promo, right? So he wasn't going to get nervous about that. I mean, I can't put myself in his shoes as how much preparation he went into, or he was always wired up, and I don't mean drug wise. I mean, he was always, he just tightly strung, as Mama Cornette used to say, even more than me. But he seemed to be most reticent to do stuff, that physical stuff, and most nervous. I've said I grabbed him one time around the neck to punch him, and I swear to God, it was like grabbing a table leg. Every muscle in his body was as tense as possible, and he would freeze there, and you'd see the look in his eye like, I'm trying not to move so you can punch me, and then he'd fly away. And he never got the physical part. And I'm not, goddamn Frank Gotch saying this. Oh, he wasn't as physical as I was. I was a better bumper, and I was a better worker than Paul Heyman. This is not a controversial statement. Because part of it was I asked the guys more. I paid more attention. I wanted to do that. I don't think Paulie ever wanted to do the physical part. And also, for whatever reason, some people just don't get it. And so I think that Paul was more nervous when he had to do physical shit. Not that it would look bad, because he seemed to like all of the shit that he did, even if it looked a little questionable. But he was scared, honestly, of getting potatoed.
And remember, all the managers he watched growing up never took bumps.
Well, that was the benefit that I had that he didn't have, is that he grew up in New York watching WWF managers, and I grew up in the South watching the Southern managers, and the Southern managers were always involved, were always doing shit, had a million stock manager spots at ringside that you could call on, and those guys up there walked the guys to the ring, went back in the garden and did TV interviews. So he had the interviews down, but he had never put himself in a position of having to do anything physical. And then, you know, until he, when he first broke in, you know, just doing a couple of independent spots, he wasn't taking bumps, and they didn't use the managers for a ton in the AWA. He'd been to Florida briefly, but he really hadn't been anywhere where he was getting a lot of experience. With my fucking second week in the goddamn business, I'm taking bumps, and I was having manager matches against Jimmy Hart when I'd been in the business 3 months. So at least they started me early, and I got it worked out and out of the way.